Okay, boys and girls, and any aquariums that are listening, this is Bob Coppage, CEO of Simplex-IT, Caraccio Geek, all that good fun stuff. And welcome to BizTech Twist. And I actually have a guest this time, Brad Gross, who is very well known in the legal world on the MSP. And apparently he lost a bet to me recently because he has agreed to join. Brad, you want to say hi or
talk about the bet I lost, or just say hi?
You could.
It is never a losing bet to be on Bob's show. Let me say that. Never a losing bet. So
go on.
Right. I'm going to need I can't unsee what you just did. That's what's going to hurt. That's the takeaway. I can't. All right. I'm going to speed dial my therapist. Hold on. She'll join us on this call. Brad Gross. So I'm an attorney. I'm Sultan of MSP contracts. I am the attorney for MSPs nationwide. Been practicing in this area for 20 plus years, counseled thousands of MSPs. I used to program on that. Yes.
For those of you who have a choice here, you can either ask your parents or you recognize that is one of the early model Radio Shack TRS-80s.
Yeah. And if you look right here, right here, it's a little bit worn on the keyboard. That is where my little hand used to sit as I typed MS-DOS and then, compiled it into assembly language and then went on from there. So, yeah, good times. Good times.
So one personal note. So I will say it's Simplex-IT. We actually use Brad as our lawyer. So one of us is obviously deranged as far as legal advice on the MSP thing. And I will say also that, and this is kind of a personal confession thing, Brad scared the hell out of me. When we first were talking and met, probably about 4 years ago or so, we talked about a couple of things. And then once I got to know him better, I realized that my fears were well-founded, but in the wrong category. He's scary for a number of reasons, but not his legal thoughts or his legal advice. So.
Fair enough. Doesn't matter that I have a Jason doll next to me. That count at all. He's not scared for his legal advice, but he does have a Jason doll next to him. So that's a little strange.
Yeah, don't ask what his definition of a jury of his peers is.
It's not good. It's not good. It's not
so
good.
Where we talked about coming on board. By the way, you have your own podcast too, right?
Yes, sir. I have two of them. Correct. I have the Technology Bradcast, and then we just launched the Cybersecurity Bradcast. So the Technology Bradcast is aimed at MSPs generally, all managed service providers with all of the different issues that they face on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. The Cybersecurity Bradcast is a little bit different. It's aimed at companies generally. Corporate cybersecurity requirements, corporate cybersecurity related topics, not just MSPs, but any company. So we actually have both of those launched. One's at technologybradcast.com and the other is at cybersecuritybradcast.com.
Cool.
We are.
And it is a borderline thrill to know that you're doing these things, rounding up.
Fair enough. Just slightly less.
Borderline.
Slightly less.
So, and just to be clear, MSP, managed service provider, that's and it's one of those poorly defined in a lot of ways, definition of an organization that's providing IT services, some or all of the IT services for organizations.
That's part of the problem too, right? That anyone can call themselves an MSP.
Absolutely. Or anyone could call themselves something other than an MSP.
You are correct. And
which gets into some really interesting things. And the topic, when I first approached you, once you'd lost the bet, and by the way, thank you for the ostrich. I didn't know they ship those live. It's odd. Sorry, but the one thing that
God, you can't keep a secret these days.
What we talked about is, as far as topic goes, is whose fault is it being IT? And just kind of because that seems like such a simple question, and it's such a ridiculously complex question, especially when you talk about IT.
Agreed. Because anyone right now can jump into the industry and call themselves a managed service provider, a managed security service provider, right? An MSSP. There is no regulation. There is no baseline against which somebody must measure to jump into the industry. And as a result, you have the whole spectrum in the industry, right? You have really good all the way back to the totally inept, and the reason why we have courts and litigators and everything in between.
Well, and you can also have a situation where, because back in my day, people used to make good amount of money by just selling their services. They were just this single person shop, and they did so. They weren't trying to be, evil or illegal or whatever, but they couldn't do everything. So they just went out and managed a network, or they went out and added end users, or they did that sort of fun stuff. So it's always been a complicated workforce. It's how the goods and services are delivered.
Yeah, I agree. And especially as the industry evolved from a break fix into this managed service. Oh, we could remotely monitor and manage. Great. Oh, here's an endpoint protection solution we could throw in there, and so on. And as these things got into the mix and became easier to implement, you had a lot of people who were break fix people who really weren't qualified to move into the managed services industry start to just aggregate services to the point where now they have services that are in tension with one another, that don't work as well collectively. They may or may not be the best solutions for their customers, but it's sort of an evolution. It brought us to this point. The question is, what are we going to do about it now, and how do we protect MSPs from their customers when things go wrong?
Well, and you can also say, how are we going to protect the customer from the MSP from the customer, as well as the provider who is providing some of the tools or services necessary for either the client or the MSP to use. And honestly, a lot of this stuff, the MSP is just another actor in this whole game.
Mm-hmm.
They may or may not be the primary, may or may not even be involved.
You're right. No, you're right. And your point about how do we also, the flip side of the coin, how do we protect the customer from the MSP and so forth? That's a much larger question that's being debated everywhere. It was the question was even amplified by the cybersecurity strategy report that was released last week, which was not only designed to discuss national security, but it also addressed how do we protect the customer from service providers that don't do the right thing, that don't have the right processes in place, that are building software solutions on top of shaky, at best, shaky old solutions, and offering those. Where do we start, Bob? You tell me.
I thought you'd never ask. So, well, and part of it is in my opinion, you recognize the impossibility of it. Because you could be talking about and simplifying this to the nth degree. You can almost start with there's three players or providers here. You have the company or the organizations that are providing the tool. Now that could be your Microsoft, Kaseya, ConnectWise.
Pick your vendor.
You got it.
No endorsement by mentioning them now, so on and so forth.
Or no assaulting.
No assaulting. Right. No persecution.
You got it.
Vendor by including them. Mm-hmm.
But you've got those companies who are providing services either directly to the end client or through the MSP, through the managed service provider. Then you've got the managed service provider, or you don't. It could be that it's all through the internal IT. Then you've got the actual consumer, direct or indirect consumer of those services, and which would be that end client. And whose fault is it?
I don't know. I don't know whose fault it is. And I don't actually think we're ever going to be able to put blame anywhere, because there's fault to go around everywhere, right? At the consumer level, people want what they want. They see a solution, they see a bright, shiny object, they buy it, and then they find out later, oh, it stole your identity. Oh, it wasn't secure. Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. So the people who look at bright, shiny objects will always look at bright, shiny objects. I don't think we're changing that mindset anytime soon, at least not in a significant way. On the flip side, you have the software companies. The software companies have two goals. One, to satisfy the need of the people who see the bright, shiny object. So they're trying to produce those objects as quickly as possible. And of course, they have profits in mind. So they're trying to, constantly provide something new, something better, something more advanced, building on, rickety foundations. So that's a problem. And then, of course, you have the MSPs that are in the middle, some of whom are qualified, some of whom are not. all of whom are trying to provide the best solutions for a client that they may or may not understand, and do so in a way that is financially positive for them.
Right.
It's a tough situation. So I think that instead of trying to figure out whose fault it is, I think we just have to figure out how do we resolve it at each level.
Okay.
Or we could just say it's your fault. I mean, literally your fault. That's fine.
Oh, no, I'm married, so that works.
Oh, it's clearly your fault.
Yeah, it's
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you should.
I don't know how to clean up after an ostrich. But here's the thing, is that because you bring up the profits, which is critical, because all organizations like to make money and all of that kind of fun stuff. And then that's true for the client. So you also have clients who are essentially denying the fact we don't want to pay extra.
Mhm.
We're not interested in paying for these additional goods and services that someone, whether it be a single MSP or they're out testing the waters or the like. So we're not going to pay extra for all these security pieces, parts that we're told we need. And that could also include just training. That could also include, I'm not buying stuff from Best Buy anymore. It could be whatever. And so the business person, who's that managed service provider or the like, is left with that conundrum. I still want to feed my kids. Do I take that business even though this person refuses to do what I know they need done? Yeah. And if that transaction happens, whose fault is it?
Who's paying me?
So I could
go either way. Which way you want me to go? I could go.
Which honestly, but that is part of the challenge we've got right now.
That is right, and that is. I mean, we make a joke of it, but that's the truth. The truth is that there are two ways to argue it, and it depends on who's paying the attorney. From the customer's perspective, they look at the MSP and they say, "You're my trusted advisor. There should be some sort of fiduciary duty, given our closeness and given the fact that you have." Access to everything that I have, my data, my security, right? Everything, that you should have done a better job. You have the MSP that turns around and says, listen, I asked you, I told you what to do. You didn't listen to me. And our relationship is a contract. I'm not your daddy. I'm not your doctor, right? I'm not your lawyer. There's no privileged relationship. It's by contract. I offered it to you. You didn't take it. That's it. And that's the battle, right?
Okay.
That's the battle.
Let me throw a monkey wrench into this. Let's do that exact same conversation, except in this case, it's an employee of the client,
Mm-hmm.
and they bought a security package or something. So there's no MSP.
It's an employee of the client. Go on.
Employee of the client who they use tools that they thought were going to work better, and they didn't. Does that change that argument any? I mean, obviously, the employee or the client, they can fire their employee.
Mm-hmm.
They probably don't have a lot more recovery.
You're talking about like in a co-managed situation, or
no? I'm talking about the MSP doesn't even exist. So there's a company that has an internal IT department, mm-hmm. and that internal IT department is doing what theoretically the MSP would if the MSP was there.
Right.
And the same bad thing happened. And that CEO of that company refused the IT director. The IT director said, hey, we need these additional security. They said, no, we don't. You like your job. You're going to keep doing things.
You're going to keep doing it the wrong way.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Is there a significant difference between that and when there's an MSP?
No, I don't see the difference. Right. One way is a person or an entity with knowledge making a recommendation of a best practice of what they need, and the person with the pocketbook who doesn't have knowledge but has the money saying no. Okay, you could sort of supplant that, that paradigm onto the MSP situation, onto an employer-employee relationship, onto pretty much any relationship, any service relationship.
So it's tough when you start playing that game because you don't have a contract with your employee.
That's true.
So you don't have an employee who is basically saying, I'm legally obligated to do your job.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have a way unless that person, actually was the hacker themselves.
Right.
You don't have a way to recover any of your lost costs or revenue or
No.
anything along those lines. But
No, and
otherwise,
ultimately the buck stops at the CEO level. Whereas in the MSP situation, they can quickly and easily point the finger at the MSP and say, this is on you. And then the MSP turns around and says, well, we told you what to do and you didn't listen to us.
right.
And then the client turns around and says, show us where in your agreement it says we have to listen to you, because I don't see that. I do see where it says you're going to be our trusted IT partner and you're going to do the right thing and fix things. So fix it. Now what?
And you also have the issue of, I look to your website and your website says you're going to keep me secure, you're going to keep me safe, and you're going to do all these wonderful things so that I'm not going to get hacked.
That's exactly right. So, MSPs, what you just sort of maybe unknowingly dove into is the whole area of marketing puffery and what MSPs are promising on their websites and what they're promising, what their salespeople are promising, and what they're actually delivering. And sometimes there's a lot of daylight between those two concepts.
But I was on my phone and I got a commercial that was telling me if I eat some kind of gummy bear, I'm going to lose 20 pounds a week.
You mean that's not working?
All right. The ostrich ate them all, so they're all gone.
Cancel the gummy bears.
No, but marketing is built on making these outrageous claims.
Of course. Of course. The
So
problem is that with the gummy bear example, what's the harm, right? You take our gummy bears, you're going to lose weight. So they didn't lose weight. Okay, they're out $20.
Right.
The problem with the MSP is that you say you'll sleep safely and securely, knowing that we're going to take care of your security and you'll be 100% fine. Not only is the MSP impacted, but all of its customers are. This is not a one-person impact. This is a global impact, right? Or a community impact. So different risks and different responsibilities, and certainly a lot more people impacted.
Okay. And MSPs.
Are you fed up with reactive IT providers who take too long to respond, let problems fester, and nickel and dime you for every little thing? Say goodbye to those frustrations by choosing Simplex-IT, home of Amazon's best-selling author and BizTech Twist host Bob Coppage. As Northeast Ohio's friendly neighborhood MSP, Simplex-IT has been providing top-notch managed and co-managed IT services since 2007, supporting hundreds of clients locally and across the United States. With a managed service provider like Simplex-IT, you'll benefit from proactive maintenance, 24/7 monitoring, and streamlined technology that will help you grow your business. Visit simplex-it.com for more information and to start experiencing stress-free IT today.
And again, a lot of folks, when we talk about MSPs or we talk about this industry, we talk about it as if it's at one fixed static point in terms of progress, in terms of figuring out where things are. And it's this whole Gaussian distribution. It's all over the place. Yeah,
all over the map.
Saying in the beginning. Yeah, it's all over the place. So if you were going to say, if you're going to give some advice, and let's do this in two stages. Stage one for the MSP. If you were going to have an MSP self-assess where they are, what would be like 3 things you would have them do about their organization and how they do business?
Okay, so first I would look, first you could look inward and then you could look outward or vice versa. So let's look outward.
Are we really going to go innie and outie?
We might. It's where is my therapist? She hasn't joined us yet. Oh goodness. Okay, so I think that if you're going to look outward, you have to see. I always tell MSPs when they're offering a service and they say, how should I write this up? How should it be presented to the customer? I say, look at it from the customer's perspective. Don't look at it from your perspective, right? You know what a backup and disaster recovery solution is. You know what that is. You know the limitations, what it does, what it doesn't do. Your customer doesn't know that, right? Your customer doesn't know that they can't call you up at 2:25 in the afternoon and say, I need my stuff back by 2:30. Get it done. They don't know that, right? They just know they're getting a backup and disaster recovery solution. So I think that the first thing that MSPs should be doing is whenever they look at their offerings, they should sort of turn it around and look at it from the perspective of their customer. Their customer doesn't understand a lot, right? They need things spelled out. So that's the first step. View it from the customer. Next, understand the limitations of what's being offered to you from your upstream provider. MSPs are far too quick to make grandiose promises, to make grandiose representations, to make all kinds of warranties and guarantees without understanding that the upstream providers whose services they are facilitating or reselling, they're not making those promises, right? You'll sleep securely at night knowing we have your data. I got news for you. No upstream provider is saying that to you, right? They all have these limitations of liability and warranties and so forth. I know because I write them. Upstream providers fail. And so if you're going to be an MSP, you have to think, what am I being offered, coming down the stream? And what am I offering to my customers? And they better match, right? They better comport with each other. Otherwise, you're going to have a problem. That's 2. 3. Let me think of 3. 3. I have 3. Run your business like a business. MSPs need to run their business like a business.
Wait, what?
They need, right? I'm sorry, Bob. You actually need a bank account now. Stop with the money in the mattress. Or did I just say something out of turn? The idea, okay, is that MSPs are businesses. They have partners very often. They have corporate needs. You have partners that will argue with each other. You have people that will leave, people that will come in. You have to run your business like a business. People think, oh, we're a bunch of guys. We did some break fix in the garage. Now we're a company. Well, do you have a shareholders agreement? Do you have an operating agreement? What happens if Joe, God forbid, gets hit by a bus? Now your partner is Joe's wife. You want to be a partner with Joe's wife? Does Joe's wife know what she's doing? Right? Or maybe you don't know what you're doing and she's going to be the better partner. The idea is that MSPs historically have not run their companies as true businesses. They're not protecting themselves with governing documents. They don't have employment agreements. They don't have independent contractor agreements. They sort of do things on a handshake. And then they're shocked when their infrastructure starts to crumble. That has to change as well.
So let's take those 3 things.
What 3 things?
I don't know, whatever you just said. I'm going to pretend I listened.
Okay, fair enough.
So the first one I think is a great, not only from just a business process, but also from a marketing standpoint, from the perspective of your client. Because too often, and this is true for any service provider, marketing, not just in the IT business, but in all businesses, service providers will start with we're so cool. We are so fantastic. We do this great thing, this wonderful thing. And if you don't use what we do, you suck. That's kind of the marketing thing. And then you throw in some fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And that's marketing for managed service providers for the first 10 years or so. Mm-hmm. And there's actually a concept. I don't know if you ever heard of the story brand?
Sure.
Okay. That concept of essentially you make the client the hero. Which means you have to be talking about the guy who invented it was basically a big movie fan. He said, nobody wants to be rescued by the hero. They want to be the hero.
Right.
So that works very, very well hand in hand with what you were saying earlier about put it in the terms of the client's perspective. And that's great, especially because stereotypically IT people are lousy at that. Absolutely.
Horrible. Absolutely. And they don't understand that they forget how they themselves, think about it before you were an IT person. What did you understand about the industry? Nothing. Well, that's where these customers are coming from.
Yeah.
Right.
Or think about it from another industry. I mean, I have no clue about cars. Right. I have no clue about power tools. I have no clue about so many things. I'm absolutely clueless. And we're all idiots. It just depends on the topic.
I've heard that about you too, by the way.
Oh yeah. And I got a lot of topics I can be idiot. I'm multifaceted.
I'm a multifaceted idiot. It's fine. I know nothing about a lot of things.
Yeah. I'm not a one-trick idiot pony here.
I understand.
But then your second is understand the limits, whether it be because of the people providing service to you to then resell, but understand whatever the limits are that you're delivering, because the only time that's going to come up is when it fails.
Right. That's right. And then people are going to start to question the scope of your service. And then they're going to compare and contrast whatever you were delivering to some other service out there and say, I thought I was getting that. And now you're in the middle of litigation or arbitration due to ambiguity, due to mismanaged expectation.
Absolutely. And then the third point I thought was good, which really was shocking right there.
And I got 3 in a row.
Yeah. Well, no, I didn't say the first 2 are good, but
Okay,
I implied it. I'll give it.
That's true.
I'll give you. I implied. No, but the whole concept of a majority of managed service providers and probably service providers in general backed into the entrepreneurial side or backed into the management side. They were the tech first and foremost.
Yep.
And it is, there's certain aspects in life that are evolutionary and there's certain aspects in life that are revolutionary. And I really do think that people who start their own business, when they're the ones who are providing the business, they're delivering the solution as well as doing everything else, it becomes very, very evolutionary. And they don't catch up on the CEO side of things and all of the things that you're talking about. What are the fiscal responsibilities? What are the legal responsibilities, so on and so forth? That's slow. And I can tell you from personal experience, it doesn't happen. You don't develop those skills at the same pace that you need them. In some cases, you'll do it faster. And in a lot of cases, you'll do it slower. And again, you get back to that whole, one of my favorite sayings, the worst time to learn CPR is when someone's having a heart attack. The worst time to learn that you have to have, some kind of agreement when the partnership dissolves is while the partnership is dissolving.
That's right. When everyone's pointing fingers and one person stops coming into the office and so forth. And then you say, well, now what?
Yeah.
What? Well, now, $500-600 an hour, lawyers will talk all day about now what. That's not the time to talk about it though, right?
Or is this the time to ask you whether this is billable?
You're first catching on. Goodness gracious. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I'm going to go on the hope that it isn't.
Fair enough.
Sad.
I'll give you a waiver, a one-time waiver.
It lasts for 5 minutes. But let's take that same question. What are the 3 things that you would say to the client? As far as how they would
client of an
MSP
purchasing
a
service,
consumer of IT services.
I think that. All right, so I think that consumers need to understand and need to know that. I guess the dirty little secret of the industry is that you really don't need to be licensed. You're not regulated when you're to enter into the MSP industry. So as a result, you really don't know with whom you are talking, right? When you hire a lawyer, or at least you hope that person's licensed, that they went to law school, that they've been admitted to a bar somewhere. Maybe not in this case, but we're moving on.
Okay.
Took the wind right out of your sail there.
I was going to ask what definition of bar you were going.
That's
this particular time, but
I got a whole wall full of bar things here. I'll give them to you if you want to scratch my name out, put Bob in there. If you deal with a doctor, a physician, that person's licensed and so on and so forth. And but when you deal with an MSP, you really don't know with whom you're dealing. It could be someone who's really bright. It could be someone who's well-spoken and not so bright. And I think that customers would be well advised to do their research, to go online, just do a Google search, for God's sakes. I mean, we're not talking about, going into Glassdoor and figuring out the relative incomes and what people are paid and so on. I'm talking about just doing a Google search. See what has been said about that provider in Reddit, in Yelp, in any of the online forums. So I think that doing your research, like any service, is more important than any other industry, quite candidly, because again, there is a misunderstanding amongst consumers that he's offering cybersecurity solutions. He must be certified. He must know what he's doing, or she must know what she's doing. Not necessarily. Okay, so that's the first thing. Well, you laugh at that because maybe that's
no. I laugh. These days, it is how many experts on ChatGPT are suddenly coming out of the woodwork.
Well, don't even get me started on ChatGPT. I have a whole article on ChatGPT. You may have seen that. All right, so that's first. Second, I think that customers of MSPs need to take advantage of quarterly, if not more frequent, business reviews with their MSP. Too often I see customers just let this thing go. Oh, this guy's been handling my stuff forever. Well, have you spoken to your MSP about what's going on? No. Are you aware of the new technologies, new ways to improve? No. Have they asked to speak with you? I'm very busy. You need to keep in touch with your MSP the same way that you would keep in touch with your dietitian or your physician if you were on some sort of weight loss goal or something that required constant monitoring. You need to monitor. I'm not saying every day, every week, but at least quarterly. Talk to your MSP. Ask them, what are my vulnerabilities? Are you even aware of what my vulnerabilities are? Is there a way to better improve? Because I'm talking like the customer, my business has changed. The way I do things has changed. The way I'm getting customers has changed. Have you detected that? Do we need to change our relationship? That should be discussed as well. Thoughts on that? You agree so far?
So I agree so far. And it's one of those where, and there's a couple of litmus tests I think you can do on this one. One is you can ask the MSP, what are they doing differently with cybersecurity than they were doing 2 years ago? And if the answer is nothing, or you could even say, what's your budget like in terms of your cybersecurity? Because if you're not keeping up with the Joneses, in this case, the Joneses are the threats, then you're not taking it terribly seriously. The other thing you can do is sit down and do kind of a self-evaluation of what are the resources that your organization is dependent upon. Well, we're dependent upon the facility. We're dependent upon our employees. We're dependent upon our marketing. We're depending upon, well, I guess, technology.
Yeah.
Okay. What resource do you use to make sure that all of those resources are getting the appropriate, attention, however you want to define it? And if the answer is, I'm blindly trusting on any of those, you've got a problem. And that would certainly include IT.
Agreed. Yep. I think another thing, we're going to go for a third because you're into this triad thing.
It's what I do. Yeah.
I don't know where that came from, but fine. We're going in threes. I think that
I don't know what to call two. Triad is you got to admit, triad is cool.
Diode, is that a thing? I don't know.
It's an electrical thing.
It's an electrical thing from Radio Shack, which I miss.
Triad sounds cool.
Triad does sound cool. Okay, we'll go with the triad.
Got to go triad.
So the third thing, I think that customers would be well advised to ask questions about their MSPs, about what organizations the MSP is involved in, right? What they are involved with. And I am not just blowing smoke. Even though Bob and I laugh at each other, I think Bob is one of the great thought leaders in the industry. If anyone said to you, what industry events, what industry type of certifications and community organizations in the community, what are you involved with? That's it. I'll just sit back and, sit back for about 3 minutes while you rattle off, CompTIA and this and that and so on and so on. Okay. The idea is that you're dealing with somebody who knows what the hell he's talking about. And it's not just that the MSP, has a good instant appearance. There's depth of knowledge. And if you really want to start to differentiate MSPs from each other, if you really want to do your due diligence and figure out, who do I trust with my data? Who do I trust that at 3 a.m. when something goes down, I can call this person? I think you should ask the MSP, the owners of the MSP, what certifications do you have? Who are you involved with? Are you involved in any subcommittees, right? Are you involved with the CompTIA Cybersecurity Committee, as you are? Are you involved with, and find out, because MSPs that sit and rest on their laurels eventually will become obsolete. But you won't know as a customer that they're obsolete until something really bad happens. So I think that customers would be well advised to ask questions about certifications and organizations that they're involved with. What do you think of that?
The word I'm focusing on is depth. Because I think depth is great, but it's not just a skills or learning. It goes across the board. Because you could talk about depth in terms of what's that organization's involvement with their partners. What's their involvement in the industry? What's their involvement in terms of their development? What are they doing differently today than 6 months and a year from now? A friend of mine, and I had friends back then, but she told me this had to be like the late 80s, because I'm old. She said the definition of obsolete in IT is, does it work? If it works, it's obsolete. And I think that was true then, and I think it's true today, because the new stuff always is buggy. but it's the latest. It's got these new whiz-bang features and so on and so forth. It's actually better than it used to be, but it's still there. And because it is so rapidly changing, and I still think that IT was originally lowercase I, capital T, then it became capital I, capital T. Now it's capital I, lowercase t, because all the innovation is going through the information and the like. And I think that if you're talking to an individual, if you are talking to an organization, if you're talking to an industry, if you're talking to anybody who essentially is resting on their laurels, and security double time speed to everything else in IT, you're basically saying, I'm willing to be stuck with 5-year-old technology.
Right. I'm willing to accept the risks that come with it.
Absolutely. And the lost opportunities, because
which again, the customer won't know about it until bad things happen. And then they turn around and say, well, oh my God, what happened? And here we are. Oh, yeah,
absolutely.
For sure. And I think that insurance companies are jumping on the bandwagon too in this regard. They are now understanding that MSPs are not all built equally. And just because somebody is offering the Sentinel-1 and a Huntress solution, again, just throwing out names, we're not endorsing, but just because you're offering the same solution doesn't mean you're of equal competency and quality of somebody else who's offering Sentinel-1 and Huntress. There is a depth, there is an experience that goes along with it. There is upkeep, and insurance companies are starting to now in their underwriting process say, who's on your team? What certifications do you have? What kind of continuing education do you have or do you maintain in your organization? And if anybody is regulating this industry right now, it's the insurance companies.
Right.
They're doing it by raising rates on those who are less qualified.
And they're also basically having the clients sign off that they are doing these following things, and then pushing back if it turns out they didn't or did so improperly.
Agreed. They're rejecting claims left and right if it turns out they didn't.
Yeah.
You're 100% right.
So
that's where things are, I think, right now. That's where it stands
today.
So whose fault is it? I still don't know whose fault it is.
And the challenge is it's everybody's to a certain degree, but situationally, that needle may swing a little bit.
It's how we're going to resolve it. And I think that MSPs will resolve it by getting educated, understanding the business that they're in, understanding and managing customers' expectations. Customers have to be more wary and aware of the people with whom they're dealing. And from an upstream provider perspective, which is a whole other topic, which we can talk about if you'd like, there has to be some sort of pressure, whether it's from insurance companies, public-private, like a self-regulated organization type thing, to pressure upstream providers to more securely handle the things that they're handling, to build better, even if it's at the expense of finances, right? Even if it costs a little more, or it means they're not releasing something every 3 months, but they're doing it every 8 to 12 months. I think there has to be pressure there as well. That's how you're going to resolve it. I don't know whose fault it is.
So we have to grow up.
Yeah, I guess got to stop playing with dolls and, stuff like this. You got to stop doing that. Oh, well.
Brad,
watch those. You can cut that out, right? That'll be edited anyway.
Oh,
yeah.
Sure it will be.
Oh, I'm sure. Mm-hmm.
Brad, as always, it was a hoot talking to you. And,
same here, my friend.
Yeah, look forward to seeing you soon. Brad Gross, again, where are your two podcasts? Where are they again?
technologybradcast.com and cybersecurity.bradcast.com. Find me there.
And in his podcast, he's a lot more serious and deals, he's somewhat more serious and deals with some really cool topics as well.
Thanks.
But for now, this is the latest biz tech twists. Bob Coppage, CEO, Simplex-IT, and his guest, Brad Gross. And as always, follow, comment,
criticize.
Jokes. Oh, absolutely. Seriously.
Criticize. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, well, with that downer. All right, guys.
Thanks for having me, Bob.
Yeah.
See you soon.